Chapter 4 of Life in a Thousand Worlds. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tammy Sanders. Life in a Thousand Worlds by William Shuler Harris. Chapter 4. A Glimpse of Jupiter. The next world I visited was Jupiter, the greatest orb in the solar system, almost 1,400 times as large as our Earth. I found it whirling on its axis so rapidly that it makes an entire revolution in about 10 hours of our time. This voluminous sphere is in great contrast to both the Moon and Mars. Its physical constituency resembles a liquid more than a solid, and it is quite hot, but not luminous. It has cooled sufficiently to admit human forms, although certain parts of the giant planet are void of all life, owing to the more intense heat in those sections. The atmosphere is charged with thick clouds, never at rest, and continually forming into immense scrolls close to the surface of the planet. The human life of Jupiter is found in certain belts where the crust of the planet has been hardened for several thousand years. The people have risen from rude, primitive conditions to a state of splendid civilization. In size, they are colossal giants averaging 25 feet in height. Their two powerful arms extend from what we would call the hips, and no one would imagine with what facility these giants use them. After extended observation, I was almost tempted to wonder why our arms were placed so high on the body. These Jupiterites are more handsome than the people on the Moon or Mars, and their faces shine with a superior intelligence. Instead of hair on the head, they have something unknown to our world, quite similar in appearance to wool. Their two eyes blaze like balls of fire, making one of the giants appear like a fearsome though not repulsive monster. The most unusual feature about the face is the peculiarity of the chin and forehead. Each is covered with convolutions of an insensible, rubber-like membrane. The people of Jupiter excel in mechanical skill. They build houses, but not by long, tedious days of painstaking labor. Such things as plaster and paint are unknown. A Jupiterite can purchase from one of the mammoth structural factories house sides, house ends, house floors, or partitions, after any general design he wishes, and have them trimmed in any style his fancy suggests. The materials used are non-combustible and waterproof, and will wear indefinitely. These houses can be put together in a few days, and the trimmings adjusted in less than 2 weeks, unless the structure is very elaborate. Nearly all of their house furniture is also non-combustible, and no one has ever conceived the idea of forming a fire insurance company, simply because there is no need for one. As the people are so much larger than we, so are all things relatively larger than we see them in our world. Wagons and carriages and cars appear as if they were made for mastodons. I saw one of their largest bridges spanning a molten lake. Aside of it, the East River Bridge would be a dwarf, either in height or length. It is certainly thrilling to step into a world where all things are so gigantic. At times a feeling of insignificance crept over me, but I took courage when I thought that a man's greatness consists in his mental powers, and not in his physical bulk. For it is true that the 50 ounces of brain in the skull of a Newton have accomplished more marvels than the 10 pounds of brain matter found in the most cultured Jupiterite. We must give the people of Jupiter credit for exercising a large amount of common sense. In many ways they are more practical than we, and this is quite as noticeable in their language as in any other respect. They have one simple language for the whole globe, and in its use they are all agreed. Their vocabulary is small, because they have not yet branched out into the infinite varieties of manufacture and invention. Their words have a marvelous correspondence with the thought or the action expressed, the manner of emphasizing syllables going a great distance towards expressing the shade of emotion desired. I admired especially one thing on this bulky planet. They have but one authority for language. Hence there is no Century, Webster, Worcester, or Standard, each rivaling the others for supremacy to confuse the honest student with diverse spellings and pronunciations. The words of the language of Jupiter are all embodied in one unique dictionary, which is revised at intervals by a board of official educators. To this board all suggestions for inserting new words and changing the classification of old ones must be given for their consideration. This dictionary is printed by the government, and a copy of it is furnished free to all public places and to each private family. When a revision is made, a copy of all the changes is furnished to each dictionary holder. The authority of this dictionary is final, and no one is permitted to publish a conflicting work. The Jupiterites have displayed their highest genius in their astronomical advancements. They know all about the solar system, and have made discoveries inside of Neptune's orbit which our astronomers have never observed. I was thrilled with delight when I saw their telescopes with the marvelous lenses that opened the locked doors of the Milky Way. No wonder the astronomers of Jupiter have a more comprehensive view of the universe than we have. Their lenses are so powerful that they have seen the outlines of our rugged mountains, and have discovered on our world unmistakable signs of human life. During my visit thither, the experts were working on a much larger lens, and it is claimed that when this is finished, human forms can be discerned on the Earth, and can be seen with more accuracy on Mars. The 5 moons that revolve around Jupiter have been studied with marked interest. 2 of these moons have displayed definite signs of human life. It is promised also that the coming lens will unlock the doors of the several moons and permit the astronomers of Jupiter to pry into the secrets of their celestial neighbors. During the past 1,000 years, the Jupiterites have made numberless attempts to establish communication between these moons and their planet, but all their efforts have failed. Either the Moonites are too stupid, or the Jupiterites are not expert enough in throwing out signals or in building airships. For no one thing more than another did I envy the astronomers of Jupiter than for their marvelous magnifying lenses. I knew that if we had such lenses, or the material to make them, we could watch with ease the inhabitants of the Moon or of Mars, and we could study the intelligent life of Mercury and Venus, to say nothing of the great advantages we should have in observing comets and all the numberless starry systems scattered throughout illimitable space. The religious life of Jupiter proved to be intensely interesting to me. They have a sacred book, which corresponds to our Bible, and it has always remained in its original form because there is but one language. Since I left my own world, I had not felt so kindred a touch in spirit as when I invisibly entered one of their great temples of worship, as we might call it. No vocal music was there, but the mute beckoning of several thousand arms, as if to implore the favor of the great Inzurk, or Creator, was impressively eloquent to me. I was thrilled with joy as I learned more of their religion. I found that their love and service were akin to those of our planet, and that these same bonds unite them one to another. My conceptions were enlarging as I saw the family of God enlarging, and I felt that although I was unlike them in the physical, yet I was their brother in spirit, and that we all have one Father. Religious liberty was enjoyed until a few centuries ago, when certain restrictions were formulated. It was seen that some, in exercising their liberty, proved to be a curse to the state, and consequently a sharp battle ensued against the liberal element. The Church won the conflict, and now the profession of atheism is not allowed. If it can be shown that any sane person takes such a position, he is given a certain period to recant. If recantation is not forthcoming, he is placed in the public workhouse until he acknowledges the existence of deity. Atheists are scarce under this severe ruling. You may well know how I was startled to see such summary action taken in regard to unbelievers. At first I prided myself that I belonged to a world of free thought and free speech. But when I saw the magnetic effect of these Jupiter regulations, I was in doubt as to the superiority of our religious and irreligious liberties. The soil of Jupiter yields abundantly. The animals are all large and of species unknown to us. They have animals that resemble our elephant and ox. These they use for food. Common birds, as large as geese or turkeys, flourish in the extensive forests, and furnish about 1/3 of the food for the giants. The vegetation is after the order of our world, except that the curse of weeds and thistles is only 1/4 as great. But the people of Jupiter have learned more than we of the use of these weeds, and certain of them are cultivated to a wide extent. I spent a long time on the planet. I saw the fiery lakes that are fed by subterraneous streams of lava, and the geysers of blue flame darting their immense tongues high in the air. As near as 50 miles to these fiery centers can be seen gardens of vegetation and fields under cultivation. I yielded at last to a desire that prompted me to make a personal appearance. So I stopped on a thoroughfare and occupied a rustic seat at the roadside. I was dressed in my earthly costume, and sat composedly awaiting developments. The first living creature that observed my presence was a passing quadruped. It was larger than a wild goat, and was a small specimen after its kind. For want of a better name, I will call it a dog. As soon as I was spied by this animal, he set up a hideous howl and ran at full speed. Knowing my own homeliness, I had all charity for the animal, and did not censure him for being so terribly frightened at my appearance. Soon a full-grown giant came along. He chanced to be a learned professor, out for an evening walk, as we would say. He seemed to be in deep meditation, and did not notice me until he was near my side. Then he stood breathless, while a feeling of fear and surprise evidently possessed him. I sat motionless, looking up into his eyes, and saw the convolutions on his forehead and chin quivering quite perceptibly. He evidently judged me to be some undeveloped species of mongodin, an animal of Jupiter bearing faint resemblance to our man-ape. To my surprise, he suddenly grasped me and tightly held me fast in his gigantic arms. I made no effort to free myself. His surprise was only intensified at my resignation. He expected a struggle, but I neither made an outcry nor resisted capture. Like an infant, I lay in his arms, while he passed quick glances all over me. He was baffled beyond all measure, and hurried away toward the great college nearby. Upon reaching the museum department, I was placed in a strong cage, and the doors were doubly secured. My captor ran from my presence, and in a few moments returned with 2 other professors. They peered into the cage in painful astonishment, while I contented myself by taking my watch apart and occasionally glancing at my select audience. Then commenced the gibbering consultation, all of which I well understood. My captor, related the full circumstances in connection with his walk in the grove and the manner in which he captured me. He dwelt particularly on the indifference I manifested in all his dealings with me. "It is a baby mongodin," suggested the one professor, while the other advanced the theory that I was an abnormal child of some Jupiterite. My watch excited their curiosity. One reached his hand cautiously through the bars and evinced by his actions what he wanted. I looked up into his eyes and spoke my first words. "Patience, please, till I put the watch together, and you shall have it." Not only did his arms fly away from the cage, but his whole body fell prostrate to the floor, whether from fright or surprise I knew not. His two companions were also in a sorry plight. I pretended not to notice their consternation, and kept myself busy in placing the parts of my watch together. After a while I was addressed by a trembling questioner. "Where is your home, my child?" I did not lift my eyes, but completed my little self-appointed task, and at once raised the watch in fulfillment of my promise. The timid professor ventured to accept it, and, as he received it from my hand, he again asked, "Where is your home?" "Further away than the circumference of your world," I distinctly answered. At this time the three agreed that I was an insane child, born out of time, and that I satisfied my propensities by gathering to myself such idiotic things as my watch and garments, including my hat and shoes. A quiet consultation followed, after which one of the professors retired from the room and soon returned with certain morsels of food. Upon handing them to me, I at once remarked, "Keep these morsels for yourself. I have better food to eat, of which you know nothing." The other two professors had by this time observed that my watch was a marvelous piece of mechanism beyond their most delicate accomplishments, and they announced the fact to their other companion, who again looked at me in breathless surprise. "Where did you get this fotsil, or plaything?" he queried in one breath. "Farther away than the circumference of your world," was my evasive and to them unsatisfactory reply. "Won't you tell us, child, how far away that is?" asked another with subdued impatience. "Millions of miles." Of course I spoke in terms of their linear measurements. "How many millions?" "Sometimes 500 and sometimes 600 millions." Without giving them a chance for asking me another question, I offered to let them see my home if they would permit me to use the most powerful telescope in their observatory. My listeners were indeed amazed, and were about to pour upon me a volley of interrogations. I assured them that I would answer no more questions until I knew whether my request would be granted. This necessitated a consultation with the chief astronomer, who, upon learning of my peculiar request and of my unnatural formation, hastened to the museum to see the monstrosity. I knew from what I had previously learned that this gentleman was the greatest living astronomer on Jupiter. He peered at me in the cage and was dumbfounded. He exchanged a few sentences with the professor and again turned to me. "At what time do you want the telescope?" he asked. "Immediately." "You shall have it, just to satisfy our curiosity," he said as he hastened from the room. I heard the professor caution him strictly to tell no one of my presence, so as to avoid a rush from the student ranks. In less than an hour I stood at the side of the largest telescope in our solar system, watching the deepening shadows of night as they fell upon Jupiter. Illustration: viewing our Earth from Jupiter. I spent another hour examining the ponderous machinery that was required to swing this mammoth instrument and to adjust it when scanning the heavens. By this time, my four companions were convinced that I was not an idiot, and I could see by their strange manner that they were regarding me as a spirit. I gave my directions to the astronomer and beheld the cylinder, 200 feet in length and 20 feet in diameter, swing around until it pointed toward a little flickering light that shone like a distant star. I looked into the eyepiece, managed to get the tube pointed accurately, and then requested the astronomer to focus the lenses so as to bear upon the planetary light in range. He knew at once the planet I had singled out. He called it Zoide. After the focusing was completed, I looked, and behold, I could readily discern many of the physical features of my own world. "That is my homeland!" I cried triumphantly. "I live on Zoide, or Earth, as we call it." Of course my listeners were incredulous, but I proceeded to explain to them as I looked through the telescope. That dark ridge to the left is called the Rocky and Andes mountain systems. The shining belt on the central portion is the Mississippi River. The rough ridge to the right is the Allegheny system of mountains. Then I indicated the location of our larger cities. As I pointed to New York, I saw a mere speck moving. I was convinced that it was one of our large steamships, and as I so explained, the astronomer looked at me with absorbing interest. He informed me that he had often seen the moving of the spots, and thought they were some cloud formations peculiar to our world. But I insisted on the steamship explanation, and proceeded to describe an ocean liner, for these Jupiterites are not familiar with oceans of cold water on which float numerous craft. I was then a royal guest, and passed a most felicitous night with these four celebrities. We talked of the more powerful telescope that the government of Jupiter was manufacturing, and of the still greater views it promised to reveal. Then I informed them of our system of science. They were astonished at the great civilization extant on Zoide, or our Earth. I told them that a subtle power lay dormant in the atoms and molecules of matter, which could be released and utilized, and that we in our world called it electricity. During the night I learned that the convolutions on the chin and forehead of a Jupiterite served the purpose of a new sense. By the aid of these convolutions, any person of Jupiter can tell in daylight or darkness the nature of any surrounding substance, whether it be hard or soft, combustible or non-combustible, good for food or not. I confess that I was unable to grasp the idea intelligently. So the people on the moon had the same difficulty in understanding the use of my nose. Before morning dawned, I informed my appreciative quartet that I would see them no more, that I had paused at Jupiter Station long enough, and that I must be off on my vast excursion trip. They earnestly entreated me to remain, so that the college students and representative persons could get a glimpse of me, but I refused all their entreaties. When they found that I had power to leave them instantly, they besought me to remain for a few last words. "Shall we not see you again?" affectingly asked the astronomer. I told them that I expected to spend eternity in the kingdom of our God, who made all the stars and worlds, and holds each in its respective place. "If you are pure in heart to Him," I continued, "there can be no doubt but that we shall see one another again in that happy celestial center, where our eyes will be our telescopes, where our pure hearts will assent to the fatherhood of God, and where our souls will be quickened at the universal fountain of love." End of chapter 4.